All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a fascinating 2025 study out of Helsinki that completely flips the script on what we thought we knew about students and money. We've all heard the standard advice, right? If you want young people to avoid debt, just teach them how money works. Teach them financial literacy. But this brand new research reveals that the reality of debt is way more psychological and, honestly, way more structural than just a simple math problem.
To really get why this matters, we gotta look at the big picture. Finland is currently facing a pretty turbulent economy. Unemployment is up, GDP is contracting, and right now, student loan volume has absolutely skyrocketed to over 6 billion euros. Master's graduates are typically walking away with an average of 23,800 euros in debt. And worse, in 2024, the government had to pay out a record 112 million euros just to cover unpaid, defaulted student loans.
With default surging like that, it forces us to ask a really tough question. Why are incredibly smart, highly educated university students falling into these massive, stressful financial traps? These are bright people. They handle complex academic workloads every day. Yet thousands are experiencing severe financial strain, which, by the way, the study defines as the material and psychological stress of just not being able to meet your debt obligations.
For years, we've been told there's a silver bullet here: financial literacy. The standard OECD definition basically says that if we just teach young people the right combination of financial knowledge, like how compound interest works, along with good behaviors like budgeting, they'll be perfectly fine. We've treated financial education like a universal vaccine against bad debt.
But here is the absolute plot twist of this study. While high financial literacy is great at predicting responsible debt, meaning things like making timely repayments and sticking to a budget, it completely fails to prevent risky debt. This is a massive disconnect. Even students who ace financial knowledge tests are still falling into dangerous habits like credit card arrears or overborrowing. Just knowing the math doesn't actually stop the risky behavior.
So what's going on? Well, behavioral finance hits the nail on the head here. Our brains are literally wired with cognitive biases that totally hijack our rational decision-making. Classical economics likes to pretend we're perfectly rational calculators weighing costs and benefits. But the reality? Our decisions are deeply clouded by psychological traps.
Take framing effects, for example. Because of something called loss aversion, students are super vulnerable to how a debt is packaged. So when a loan is pitched as a seemingly manageable monthly payment of just 50 euros, students are easily tricked into focusing on that tiny immediate number. They completely gloss over the painful reality of the 3,000 euro total debt. It kind of softens the psychological blow of borrowing,
And then there's the overconfidence bias. The data shows that high financial knowledge mixed with high confidence is fine, but high confidence without the matching knowledge? Total disaster. Students constantly overestimate their ability to juggle multiple debts. They just assume they'll effortlessly land a high-paying job right out of school, right up until a sudden external shock, like losing a part-time job or getting a surprise medical bill, throws them into a full-blown financial crisis.
Section 2. The frictionless trap, buy now, pay later. If framing effects and overconfidence are the vulnerabilities, buy now, pay later, or BNPL, is the exact technology engineered to exploit them. It's a total paradigm shift in how young adults interact with credit.
Think about those integrated checkout buttons. They completely mask the true cost of consumption. You aren't handing over physical cash, you aren't even swiping a card, you're literally just clicking a button that delays the pain of payment. This reduction in psychological friction actually tricks students into inflating their spending by over 6%. And of course, that leads to severe budget shortfalls when those delayed installments finally hit.
And this spirals so fast. Students aren't just using BNPL for a fun splurge, like a new jacket. They're using it for essentials, like groceries. Before they know it, they're juggling multiple hidden payment plans across all these different apps in stores. This scattered borrowing culminates in massive financial strain because, honestly, it is nearly impossible to mentally track 5 or 6 overlapping installment schedules when you're on a tight student budget. To put that into perspective, the buy now, pay later market in Finland alone is projected to hit a staggering 3.78 billion euros in 2025. The study makes it incredibly clear. This frictionless debt trap isn't just an isolated issue for a few reckless spenders. It is a systemic, nationwide threat to young adults who are trying to navigate their own finances for the very first time. Section 3. The human element. Finnish versus international students. To truly understand this crisis, we have to look at the people involved. We need to compare local and international students to see how cultural backgrounds and systemic safety nets totally change financial outcomes. The researchers did a direct match group analysis right there in Helsinki.
And the data reveals a shocking reality. When tested, Finnish and international students actually possess the exact same level of financial knowledge. They both know the math equally well. Yet international students suffer from significantly higher financial strain, way more stress, and much lower financial confidence. Just having the knowledge cannot explain this massive gap in well-being.
So what's driving the disparity? Well, it comes down to invisible walls, structural barriers. International students are dealing with language barriers when trying to read complex loan terms. They lack the local family support networks that act as a crucial safety net. They aren't familiar with local consumer protection laws, and they often face limited access to formal, low-cost credit that literally forces them toward riskier, high-interest options.
Which brings us to the study's core conceptual framework. It essentially proves that financial literacy is not a straight line to good behavior. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a maze. Literacy is heavily moderated by external systemic barriers, like being an international student in a brand new country, and it's distorted by those internal psychological biases we talked about, like overconfidence.
Ultimately, we've got to totally reframe how we look at borrowers. The study proves we need to abandon the whole idea of good or bad financial decision makers. It's just not true. Student debt behavior operates on a dynamic continuum. Students constantly shift back and forth between responsible and risky behaviors, depending on their immediate life circumstances, their fluctuating stress levels, and whether or not they have a structural safety net to fall back on.
The big takeaway here is crystal clear. Simply teaching the math isn't enough. Universities, policymakers, financial institutions, they need a holistic solution. We've got to pair foundational education with real efforts to calibrate student confidence so they can accurately assess risk. But even more importantly, we absolutely have to build systemic support networks that address the specific cultural, linguistic, and structural vulnerabilities pushing these students into risky debt in the first place.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought to mull over. We all like to think we're perfectly rational with our money, right? I mean, we know how addition and subtraction work, but if deep financial knowledge isn't enough to protect us, take a hard look at your own wallet and ask yourself, what hidden psychological forces and systemic traps are really swiping your card today?